George Orwell, the famous British writer who warned us about Big Brother, the mind behind 1984 and Animal Farm, the master of exposing government control, was himself a part of the system. What if I told you the man who warned us about surveillance was surveilling others, and the man who warned us about propaganda was writing it? This isn't fiction. It's a real wartime mystery that no one talks about. And today, we are digging it up. Was George Orwell a government spy? The story begins in 1935. Orwell, just 32 years old, is back from his volunteer service in the Spanish Civil War. He's anti-fascist, anti-authoritarian, a man on the fringes. And suddenly, he's on MI5's radar. MI5 is the United Kingdom's domestic counterintelligence and security agency. It works to protect the country from threats to national security, including terrorism, state threats, and espionage. We know that MI5 flagged Orwell for his attendance at communist meetings during his time in Yorkshire, researching for his book, The Road to Wigan Pier. According to MI5, Eric Blair, as Orwell was known then, has advanced communist views, and several of his friends say that they have seen him at communist meetings. And here's where it gets weirder. While MI5 is surveilling him, Orwell lands his first government job at the BBC. What did he do there? He wrote propaganda. From 1941 to 1943, Orwell scripted messaging for the British government, even though he describes his time there as useless or slightly worse than useless. Reflecting on this time, Orwell says that he became propaganda-minded and developed a cunning one did not previously have. In perhaps the most telling statement of Orwell's developing political tendencies, he writes this: "All propaganda is lies, even when one is telling the truth. I don't think this matters so long as one knows what one is doing and why." If we compare Orwell at this time to his main character in 1984, we can see that they are one and the same. In 1984, this character's job is to rewrite history for the party, a job that he does with great skill, even though he knows it to be false. He alters the facts to fit the narrative. So let's ask the obvious question. Was Orwell really against propaganda, or just against the kind he wasn't writing? After his time at the BBC ends in 1943, Orwell returns to writing full-time. And in 1945, he publishes Animal Farm, a fable exposing how revolutions eat themselves, how idealism curdles into tyranny. Critics loved it. Readers were stunned. But almost immediately, Orwell's fable becomes a weapon. The book caught the eye of the IRD, the Information Research Department, Britain's covert counter-propaganda unit. They specialized in Cold War influence operations, and they wanted Orwell's voice on their side. That's when, on March 29, 1949, Orwell got a visit from someone unexpected, or perhaps not so unexpected. Celia Kerwin, an agent of the IRD, and an old flame Orwell had once proposed to, came to see him again. She came to visit while Orwell was battling tuberculosis in a remote sanatorium. And what did they discuss? Not love, not regret, but propaganda. Orwell and Celia discussed aspects of the work of the IRD, and, according to Celia, Orwell was delighted to learn of them. He expressed his wholehearted and enthusiastic approval of our aims. According to the government, Orwell was all in. And then, he offered something more. He tells Celia he'd be happy to suggest those who should be writing propaganda for the IRD, and by extension, the British government. But before she leaves, he adds, if it's useful, he'd also provide a list of people who should not be writing propaganda for the British government. 1 week later, Orwell makes good on that promise. He sends to Celia what's now known as Orwell's List, a secret blacklist of writers, actors, and intellectuals to be investigated for their political leanings. It's one of the most damning documents ever linked to Orwell. A man who claimed to oppose surveillance was now pointing the state's gaze. 16 days after Orwell sent his blacklist to the British government, he tried to get involved with another. On April 22, 1949, Orwell's publisher sends an advance copy of 1984 to J. Edgar Hoover, the director of the FBI. Hoover writes back, and he says that he cannot endorse the book, and while he is looking forward to reading it, he must refrain from lending his endorsement to commercial publications. Now you might think that this is where the connection ends for Orwell, but this is where it begins. George Orwell passed away on January 21st, 1950. Shortly after, the rights to produce Animal Farm are sold to a filmmaker with documented ties to the FBI. And just who was it that was backing this filmmaker? The CIA. In 1951, the CIA begins production on Animal Farm. They will funnel over $500,000 into it over the course of its development. The goal? Reframe Orwell's warning as an attack on communism alone. Cut any critique of America, strip out the Nazi allegory, make the Soviet Union look like hell. 1 year later, while Animal Farm is still in the infancy of its development, the CIA launches another project with Orwell's works at the center. Operation A Dinosaur, a Cold War psyop that smuggled Orwell's books into Eastern Europe by balloon. Animal Farm was packaged onto thousands of balloons and floated across the Iron Curtain into countries like Poland, Czechoslovakia, and Hungary. This shows the intelligence community's commitment to spread Orwell's works as a key to their propaganda strategy. But the British IRD wasn't done either. They translated Animal Farm into 16 languages, including Chinese, Hebrew, Finnish, Swedish, and even a picture version for the illiterate. They commissioned cartoon strips, planted them in newspapers across the globe, and they have said no other book in IRD history has gotten this level of support. And no other author has become such a weapon. Animal Farm became a missile of messaging, and Orwell, its posthumous triggerman. So now we ask, what was Orwell? A man who was spied on, but handed the government a list of names. A man who mocked propaganda, but spent years writing it. A man whose books warned us about power, but used power to try and shape the world just like his enemies. Did Orwell sell out? Did he trade in revolution for influence? Or was he trying to warn us from within the machine, using government to fight the darker versions of itself? Was George Orwell a spy? Why did he have and seek out so many connections in the intelligence community? How far would his works have gone without governmental support? Would we still remember him as a literary giant like we do today? Let me know what you think in the comments. And if you enjoy stories that rewrite what you thought you knew, please subscribe.